Hi, this one's on the threat of the root file system running out of space and how we could be informed of that. We'll be using commands like df, which is disk free, du, which is disk usage, and the touch command, and obviously the find command to search for files. Quite some commonly used Linux distributions will only create two disk-based file systems when you run a default install. These two file systems are /boot and the root file system. Now there's nothing wrong with that, but it may also be cause for concern. When the root file system runs out of space, it can cause a range of serious problems that may affect the stability, usability, and even the bootability of your system. When we check out our file systems with the popular df command, we see that there are indeed only two disk-based file systems, /boot, which contains kernel files, and the root file system, which contains all of the rest. Now, next to that, we see memory-based file systems, which are not persistent, meaning that they will be gone once you power off the system. Directories in your root file system that can easily cause problems are /home, /var, and /tmp. The reason for that is that the users, by default, can write as much data in their login directories as they like, and they can also write limitless to /tmp. And the var directory contains log files, which may also consume more space than you would like. So best practice would be to create separate disk-based file systems for these directories, so they will never fill up your root file system. Because if root fills up, as mentioned, your system may become unstable. Software installations may fail, user logins may fail, and so on. So this is not what you want. Still, the default setup is only two file systems, /boot and root. So in this exercise we will pretend that we notice the root file system is running out of space, and we have to find out which files and thus which users are responsible for that. Now the first command obviously would be the df command, and if you choose the human readable option, it will very nicely tell you how much space the root file system uses. This tells us that the size is 17 gig and it has 14 GB of data and 3.6 GB of available space. Now we could use disk usage to find out how much more space particular directories take by summarizing the output, and of course we make it human readable. So for example, to check var home and tmp, we run the disk usage command like this. And we see that /tmp and /home may need some additional investigation. So let's check out /tmp by running ls. And we see that there is a pretty large file owned by Rocky. Now I know this is very easy. But what if there are multiple files filling up your system and you want to make sure that nothing strange is happening on your system since recent? So you could start with finding all files that exceed a particular size. First we run find and look for sizes bigger than 100 megabytes. Now you can ignore this kcore file. This is an in-memory file representing virtual memory. Now Rocky has some files that have to do with gaming. But what bothers us is this 10 gig file in /tmp. And what we see, it was created today. Now, what if we want to find files that were created after, let's say, 12 o'clock last night, and that they're larger than 100 megabytes? We could first create an empty file and set its date to midnight. So let's say today is June 28th, and we set the time of the midnight file to midnight. And we check the file and we see that its modification time is exactly at midnight. Okay, so now we use find again and search for files larger than 100 megabyte and created after midnight. So we look for files which are larger than 100 megabyte. They should be created after midnight, and then we run a long listing of all of these files and we redirect the error messages. Now in the entire root file system there's a couple of files that were created after midnight and take quite a bit of space. So we could say that these are anomalies, especially this big file, so maybe we should contact the owner. And of course we should create a cron job or maybe even a systemd service to monitor our system automatically. And in the description you will find some more hints on safeguarding against disk space problems. And we're done.